Hello.
Hi.
Ooh, I can hear you just fine. That's perfect.
Oh, good. It took me a second to figure out exactly what to click on.
Yeah, did you get the invite that I just sent you?
Oh, I don't know. Maybe
No,
that's
that's fine.
maybe that's what happened.
Whatever worked.
Yeah, not going to leave. Yeah. Thank
It,
you so much for organizing this.
yeah, it became a lot bigger than I expected it to be. So many people were interested in it. And I don't know if you just saw that Laura is not going to come.
I know, I'm really disappointed, actually.
I'm disappointed too. That's such a bummer. But we'll see what happens. So I'm hoping. I've actually never done one of these before. I mean, I've done a lot of hangouts, but not like the public kind. And so I'm hoping that that by inviting you and Millie specifically, you guys show up, but then not everyone else shows up. So I have researched how to boot people from the actual hangout part, but we'll see what happens.
You should give another hangout on how to do a hangout.
Yeah, well,
after this.
I'm usually like pretty up on this stuff, but it makes me nervous. Oh, she says she's there, but it's not working. Hold on, let me see. Hold on. One sec. I wonder. This is why I wanted to get us on early. So we didn't spend the first 2 minutes being like, what is happening? So,
Hi, that worked.
oh, yay. Hi. Hi, nice to see your face, by the way. I was just telling Ariana that I think I sent out the link for the public viewing and not for everyone to actually join the hangout.
I think
tried to triple check that, but I also researched how to boot people off of a hangout, so we'll see. And so, Millie, you're in DC, right? Or are you in New York?
In New York.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, we should actually see each other in person. Where are you, Ariana?
I'm also in New York.
Oh, we should have just done this as an in-person thing.
Yeah, I think
being sorry?
I think the Slate office is actually right across the street from WNYC.
Yeah, we're
very
like,
close.
You guys are on Barrick, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're very close. I would offer to get lunch afterwards, but I had already said I to do that next time. So that's really funny. But I also am originally from Los Angeles, so I kept getting really upset on TLM when people were like, let's all hang out in New York. And I'm like, no one's in Los Angeles. So this will be an equal opportunity panel.
I appreciate that.
So, okay, it looks like it works. The one other thing that I was trying to figure out is there's a way to add Q&A. I don't know, do you see that on the side? It says
I do. I see
do.
After the showcase and before the capture.
Oh, but I mean, do you see it showing up?
It says this feature is disabled.
Yeah, that's so weird. Okay, so go about your business for a couple minutes and let me see if I can figure out, let's see, we can see a chat, but we should be able to do Q&A from the audience. So let me see how I can pull that in. If you want to take a minute, I can post in the chat that I put in green the questions that I thought were useful. And then if there end up being people who are also super knowledgeable and are like weighing in, I figured we could like pull them into the chat if they're like answering a bunch of stuff so that it's not all on you guys to like answer a million questions since you're
totally.
already so generous and spending this much time.
Oh no, thank you so much for organizing this, Victoria. Seriously.
Yeah, you did
well,
all the work.
I sent it. We're starting. The whole reason I was doing this is we're restarting newsletters here. They like died a couple of years ago,
Yeah.
and I'm trying to like resurrect them. And so I sent it out to like maybe 4 people in the office, being like, "Hey, you're doing newsletters. You should probably be on this too." The editor in chief thought we were doing it as like a Slate thing and like sent it out to the whole company. And I was like, no, this is just like this is unrelated. So there might be like random salespeople who pop in and then see a bunch of women and then are confused and leave again. I don't know. We'll see what happens.
That's great.
Okay.
That was bound to happen.
You should
Sorry?
speak too. I'm curious to hear actually what's on your mind at Slate.
Yeah, I
You
mean,
should
I've
answer
done
questions too.
a lot of research on this stuff, but nothing. But we haven't really implemented any of it yet. But I can talk about what happens when you let newsletters die and like steps you have to take to resurrect them without having any proof that those steps will work. But yeah, we'll see.
That's a super interesting angle. And I would love to talk to you more about that actually.
Yeah. Do you guys have that at all? Because most of the lists that you started are new, right?
They are, but I think there's such a huge, you can make a huge selling point on like audience engagement and kind of brand building.
Mm-hmm.
And as like a long-term marketing tool, and kind of this gives you an opportunity to like either define more clearly or redefine what you think Slate is now.
Yeah. Yeah, I also think that like, I mean, I don't know if you felt like this too when you were, and we should probably say this for like the actual panel, but people in general, like non-news people, are super excited about newsletters. Like my friends who are not in the media industry read a ton of them, but I think there's a sense of sort of like jadedness around newsletters within media because they tried it like 5 years ago and it didn't, or they had it going for a long time and then it died out. And so there's sort of like this weird, even though it feels like it's a first time exciting thing for a lot of like normal people in my experience, like at Slate and other places I've worked, are like newsletters. Why would we do that again? You know.
Yeah, don't listen to them. They're not your audience.
Yeah. That's my refrain in every job I've been in. I'm like, you're not my audience. You're just making the site. Okay, so let me see if I can get our. Oh, good. We have a couple of viewers, so we should be official now and stop. Totally.
Do we get to see who the viewers are?
Uh, you can't see them, but if we have a Q&A, then they can show up. So let me see if I can get this going real quick.
I want to see the people.
I know. So we'll see. We could maybe if people are talking quite a bit, like bump them on or off too. But that requires some masterful usage of Google Hangouts, which I don't know if I'm prepared to be master of today.
Can they participate in the chat?
They should be, yeah, that's the goal here. So let me just see, but there should be a Q&A thing that where you can vote questions up or down too. Let me just see how that
I'm
works.
going to move to an actual conference room in 3 minutes.
Okay, sounds good.
So if you see a lot of movement, I'm not going anywhere.
I'll take some Dramamine, it'll be fine. Okay. Let's see. So I'm not sure why Q&A would be disabled because it says you should just be able to click on it. Let me see. Whoa, double Ariana.
Oh, I got kicked off and then.
Let me try this. Okay, I now know where I can kick you guys off, but I don't need that right now.
We're going to move to Kelly in a second.
Okay.
Let's go.
Yeah, I mean, like it is.
Okay, let me try one other thing. I'm going to be really upset if we can't get the Q&A working.
No, it's
All right.
still had a minute. Conference rooms are hard to come by around these parts.
I've heard that actually, specifically about those offices, that it's like impossible to get a conference room there.
I'm hiding in like a back room studio.
Do you guys know which thing is the Google Admin Console? Do you see that on your screen at all? Or have you seen that before?
Control room?
No, that just tells me I can kick you guys out. That doesn't help me at all.
Admin council or console?
Oh, wait, hold on. Maybe I found this. One sec. Uh-oh, we're going to start in just a second. No, that doesn't work. Ah! Okay, well, we're at noon. We have 10 viewers on the line. For the viewers who are on the line, I'm trying to set up our Q&A so that you guys can chat directly to us, because I don't believe right now that you can chat to us. In the meantime, if you have questions, you can continue to submit it to the Google Doc that I sent out prior to the call. And if anyone does know how to enable the Q&A, now would be a good time to let me know how to do it.
Victoria, I'm sending you a link via the Hangout chat, and I think that tells you how.
Excellent. Yeah, I see that, but it looks like we have to add a JavaScript thing, and I'm not sure where we would add that. So people on the line, hang on with us for just a minute while I try to figure this out.
Is there an app icon that you saw? I don't think you need to add the JavaScript. I think that was just someone trying to show.
Yeah, there's a place to add new apps, but there's just no, none of those apps are for Q&A. Oh, Hangout Toolbox, I bet that's it. Hold on a sec. Ah, wait, I think we got it now. No? Almost.
I'm way behind.
Yeah, there's still
I guess there's a delay.
there's still no way to add it. That is a bummer. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do for the people watching. We'll start talking. I'm going to pass along. I'm going to make the Q&A area let's see. Let me think about this for a second. I can pass out the little survey button to add your questions as a bit.ly link, and we can read it out. If you're not able to see, I don't think users can see the chat. But I also would love a way to have people participate in chatting. So can you guys think of any other chatting ability that we could have people add on the side so that they can talk to us directly?
Well, if it's, I mean, if we want this, if there are, not 50 people and maybe like a more manageable number, maybe we can all just jump on the Hangout.
Oh, we have an added person here.
Oh,
You're sitting next to Billy.
yeah.
Hi. Um, you can join us. So we have 30 people right now. We're limited at 10 for actually being on the call. So why don't I have you guys start introducing yourselves and telling a little bit about the newsletters that you've created. And then as you're doing that, I'll try to troubleshoot a little bit more to be able to add the Q&As as well. We'll start with that. And then go from there. Does that sound like a good plan? And for people on the call right now who are watching as viewers, our goal, I have a list of questions that you guys have submitted beforehand, which we'll ask, but we wanted to also be able to have you talk in real time. But for some reason that's disabled. And so I'm going to try to undisable it so that everyone can participate together. But in the meantime, hang tight. So I think that's a good way to start this off because we don't want to delay things too much. But Ariana, since you are the A in the alphabet, I'm going to make you go first.
Okay. So I work at WNYC, and I'm sure everyone knows this already, but it's New York's NPR station. And we are big on the other big trendy media product of the moment, which is podcasts. So I'm a producer on our podcast here called Note to Self, which at the time we launched our newsletter was called New Tech City. And the way that we launched our newsletter was this big project called Bored and Brilliant. And I think it's probably useful, I'll just give you a little bit about the mechanics of the project and hopefully won't bore anyone who already knows. But what the idea was, it was the idea of our host, Manoush, that people have dramatically changed their behavior over the past 10 years because of smartphones and technology, and there just isn't research at the moment that gives us a sense of actually how it's changing our lives. So she had this incredibly ambitious plan to put together a series of podcasts and basically have people participate in this like live action research project where we would have as many people as signed up measuring the amount of time that they were spending on their phones and then give them a week-long series of challenges that would ask them to try different things to see how it affected their usage. And we knew we were going to partner with this other third-party app, and we knew, I mean, we're a podcast, we work at a radio station, we knew there was going to be an audio component, but we didn't actually know what else this was going to entail. So I started the same day as the project started, so it ended up being kind of my baby and my thing. And after doing a bunch of research and looking at what other kinds of engagement projects were out there, what else, where we thought people were the most frustrated with their technology, we decided that not only would it be a podcast, it would also be issued by newsletter. And we decided it was going to be like everywhere that we could possibly put it on social media. It was also going to be like an on-air segment in the morning. We did a bit of a partnership with NPR. But afterwards, after the project ended, we heard from people that the primary way that they got the challenges and that they interacted with us was absolutely the newsletter. And that ended up ultimately making a lot of sense to us because it was a project. The irony of this particular project was that we were talking about technological overload and asking people to download a bunch of things and interact with us and, like a Facebook post or tweet out a reaction to the day. But really what we heard most of all was like, I'm overwhelmed by my inbox. And in getting this challenge in their inbox every morning, it was like exactly in the place where people wanted to talk about feeling overwhelmed at that particular moment every day. And it was also the way that we facilitated quite a bit of conversation with our audience. So I think this was the way that the majority of the people did the project, and it was also a really big way that people told us how the project was going for them. So some days we would get 100 emails. We would get I think on our peak day, we got like 250 emails that were basically just pushing reply to the newsletter. And a lot of people told us like they never tweet at a media organization. Like, they'd never necessarily participate in a big public dialogue, but they were interacting with the newsletter. So for us, that was huge, because we were getting this really good cross-section of our audience. We were learning about what people wanted. We were reaching people who aren't ordinarily going to interact with us on other platforms, and then building the project based around what they were saying too. So the newsletter, it was something valuable in its own right, and our core product is a piece of audio. It's a podcast, but even throughout the project, like, we started to rethink, like, well, what if we actually made the newsletter a central part of what we do? Like, what if this was in some ways as important to us as the other reporting we're doing elsewhere? And if that's the case, what do we need to be doing differently? And part of, to be mercenary about it for a second, part of the reason we started thinking this way was midway through the project, we had a couple of sponsors who came to us and were like, we want to sponsor the newsletter. So in a money-making sense, it started to be a product that we really needed to not begin to care about, but take more seriously from a business sense. So we started doing research into what people liked about the newsletter. And a lot of it was, it could be extremely responsive. It could curate what people had done the day before, especially with the feedback from Bored and Brilliant, where we would give people an engagement challenge, like, for example, put up an away message for a day and focus and see how it goes. And then at the end of the next day, we could send out a roundup of what people had used as their away messages. And sometimes this was as simple as just taking a badge that they might put up on Facebook or on Twitter and sending out a group of those in the newsletter that day and letting them share from there. Sometimes it was like people were sending us reading lists. They were sending us suggestions on all kinds of just like related topics that they found interesting. And so at this point, we have tried to continue that with our newsletter now, and we send it out once a week. There haven't really been that many. We had a large group of people unsubscribe right after, but up until now, like, we're back to basically where we were at prime Bored and Brilliant days. And the open rate, it's still hovering around 50%, which is, like, really pretty good, at least within our company at WNYC. And a lot of it is that we're trying, even though we don't send out a challenge every day, like once a week we send out the podcast, and we still are keeping that engagement portion there. So we think of it as more of a community building tool. And a lot of it, like, we'll do extra reporting, we'll do extra research, we'll ask an artist to collaborate with us for the week and, like, put something in the newsletter. Or we'll have a listener, and we had a listener recently, she started sketching out every episode as a note to self. And so we're asking her to start, maybe doing this once a week. And it's a creative platform. It's something that we're still building and we're still thinking about. And I think a lot of the success, I'm almost done, I'll hand it over to Millie, but a lot of our success with this was that we capitalized on a very early surge. So when someone signs up for a newsletter, that's exactly the moment where they're most likely to answer it. And for us, when they signed up for it, we started sending them this series of things that happened in succession, where every day there was some kind of reward in the form of exactly what they were expecting. And so now they have that habit. They had this positive first experience with us doing this project, hearing their voices, seeing their feedback incorporated. And now once a week, I think they still continue to see the same thing. And I know Victoria asked us for some lessons as well, but we can get to those. One thing we've learned over time, we use MailChimp, which is excellent because we have analytics enabled, so we can kind of understand the behavior of how people are reading, what they're doing, what they're sharing. And one day we added a way to link to the newsletter itself. So sometimes we put content in the newsletter that just isn't anywhere else, and it lets people share it. So it's been interesting to watch that happen. And I just really value on MailChimp, and I think you can do this with most other newsletter subscription services, people can just send replies right back to you. So it's this instant feedback loop and instant way of getting responses from the people who care the most about what it is that we're doing. So I'm sure there's more, but...
I'm going to pause you. I'm going to announce one thing and then also ask you a couple of questions. So for everyone who's following along with the Q&A debacle, a very smart TLMer suggested another service called ChatStep. I've emailed back everyone in TLM the link, and so we can actually see people chatting in it, which is great. So if you want to post your questions or comments, I'll moderate from there. And I'll also, let me make a bit.ly link right now so that I can read out an easy one for the rest of the people who may not have that email address. But I will read it once very slowly. http://bit.ly/1E, M as in Mary, H, V as in Victor, O.
You can rename those, Victoria.
Can I?
Yeah.
I always do it through social media, so I okay, I will rename it and I will re-announce. But please join us in the other chat step area. I knew there would be one technological hang-up with this, but this was not the one I was expecting. My question for you, Ariana, is with the amount of people who are like creating a space for conversation for you, has that become like an overwhelming part of your job, like that added community area where people can interact? How much of that is super fun and a great feedback loop, and how much of it is a pain in your ass and not worth it?
Yeah, that is the question. I love it. I think it's really important, but it can be a huge pain in the ass because not everything people say to you is going to be of immediate value. So some of the ways that we've tried to deal with that, we've tried to channel some of it into surveys. So it's like, instead of, maybe I'm not going to reply to every single email that you send, but if we give you a survey and we can look at a percentage, at least we're reflecting something back to you that like makes you feel heard, even if you're not getting an immediate reply. I also, like, I think we had to kind of reset the expectation that for a while, we were basically replying to every single email, and that needed to stop. I read all of them. I don't do everything. I have, like, it's a complicated network of inbox folders on my Outlook at the moment. I'm not the only one who reads them. Like, it's mostly my job, but like some of it's forwarding on, handing to an intern. But we started a series based off of Bored and Brilliant where we just take one piece of listener feedback and turn it into a show. We're calling it Questions of Note. And some of that, like, those end up actually being a huge pain because we have to get people to record a piece of audio, which is always difficult. But that takes, I mean, it's a huge part of my job. And at the same time, it is really cool because when you invest your energy in capitalizing on like one or two specific pieces of feedback and you find people who can serve as a model, it tends to make the rest of it better. Like, it doesn't make all of it good, but if you have one really great question and you turn it into a show, then someone else who listens to that show is like, oh, I could ask a question like that, and this is what they'll do with it. So I have decided the way that we do it is we just decide who we're going to make a model. And when we get something great, or when we get something thought-provoking, or when we get something that just somehow feels really representative, like the listener who's sitting there sketching out every episode into a note, like that's the kind of thing that really is worth my time. But that's the absolutely what we're constantly figuring out at the moment. And I'm sure that's common across all media outlets right now. It's absolutely overwhelming if you need a Bored and Brilliant project to do Bored and Brilliant, but yeah.
How did you know that reader was illustrating all your podcasts? Did she tell you?
Yeah, she told us. She sent it to us. It was cool.
Very cool.
That strategy sounds very similar to a really great strategy that I learned from Adam Mordecai at Upworthy. He's one of the head curators there. He is like the best anti-troller that I've ever seen as like a community moderator. He picks the biggest trolls and then turns them. He through sustained conversation, he takes the people who are like the most disruptive and turns them into the people who model the conversation for everyone else. I've never seen the internet become a nice place except when Adam is moderating. And it's the same kind of idea of like picking one person as an example or forcing the loudest person to be the example and then turning it into something that other people can model afterward. Okay, so I am going to just update since we're a couple minutes in. Laura was unable to join us today. Unfortunately, she had a last minute double booking, so unfortunately, she won't be joining. But we do have two super smart people here who are going to talk way more about newsletters and answer your questions. And our link, we have tried to rename, but it keeps showing up as the same bit.ly link. So I will reread it one more time. Although I am unclear as to whether or not the last letter in this is an I or an L. So we'll see how it goes. But if you want to participate in the chat, we're bit.ly/1E.
It's case sensitive too. Oh, look, we have one now.
We have a beautiful one. Thank you, Mara.
They're
It's
case sensitive.
bit.ly, bit.ly, TLM, all capital newsletter. So bit.ly/capital T, capital L, capital M newsletter. That's
Lowercase newsletter.
lowercase newsletter. Thank you. Clearly, Millie is going to trump me in all ways when it comes to bit.lys. Also, shout out to Social Flow, which does not force me to figure out how to use bit.ly directly ever. So now that we've heard a little bit about Ariana's awesome newsletter, Millie, will you talk a little bit more about your experience? You've done two really great newsletters, and you're killing it at BuzzFeed now. So I'd love to hear more about also how you became such a guru of newsletters, because that's an odd place to have that much expertise, and you truly do. You're like now a newsletter legend in media circles.
Well, thank you. I don't think I'm a guru, and I was just actually going to say that this is such a weird niche that I've kind of found myself in, because I didn't intend to, just make newsletters. But when I was at the American Press Institute, when I started there, what they were looking for was a product to help them relaunch the whole organization. So the American Press Institute used to be this kind of, like training institute for kind of old school journalists, where newspapers would send like their top editors to this place in Virginia for like X days, and they'd come back and supposedly learn something and like share it. So API, American Press Institute, was bought out like a couple years ago, maybe in 2012, 2011, and was relaunched under Tom Rosenstiel as the executive director, and he wanted to transform it into kind of a research think tank. And my job there, so I was hired to kind of lead the editorial strategy and kind of help them shape what that would even look like. And one of Tom's idea was to start a newsletter, and we used that mostly as a way. It was pretty much a branding exercise via an editorial product. So our audience we had a very specific audience. It was people working in media. And our goal was also very specific. It was to help those people working in media do their jobs better, whether that means informing them, whether that means, in addition to informing them, kind of provide them ideas to kind of stimulate or help in decision making and just keeping up, because there's so much out there. If you're trying to, just work in media, there's so much you have to follow. So that's a very like high level overview, but the summary there is that it was a very B2B product. So it was a very specific audience. It was for journalists, for other people in media, and the problems to solve there are very different than what the problems that we're solving here at BuzzFeed News right now, which is, if you want to make the comparison, it's a B2C, which is like business to business versus business to consumer. And I have a background in marketing, so I apologize for using stupid terms like this. So, Stacy, who's our editor, contacted me a while ago and told me she was moving to BuzzFeed and starting this cool new thing. And if you don't have said cool new thing, you should download our app. But one of the components of the app was this email newsletter, and I've written about both of these products, the newsletter and the app, and kind of why we did that and the thinking behind that. And the reason why, it sounds unusual to kind of launch an email when you're also launching an app, because one seems so kind of the moment. And Victoria was saying this earlier, like newsletters have been around, and there's this kind of like fatigue, not fatigue, but this like we've been there before. Like, of course, email newsletters have existed. But yeah, we launched a newsletter kind of to, another editorial product very much. And I should go back. The reason I keep saying editorial products when I talk about these newsletters is because I think the shift from, maybe when we were thinking about newsletters in the past to now is that a lot of them are kind of discrete products in and of themselves. A lot of newsletters before, especially editorial and like newsletters from news organizations, used to just be like RSS feeds and like top headlines. And now with, a handful of newsletters from like New York Times Now to The Skim to Mike to Quartz to, all of them, there's this like curated human aspect behind them. And they're designed to kind of provide you a service within the email themselves, and that's what I mean by when I say discrete, I guess. But yeah, so we launched the BuzzFeed News newsletter as kind of this faster, cheaper, easier, less demanding tool to test the editorial voice of our app. Obviously, a newsletter takes a lot of work, as any of you who are working on newsletters can attest to, but I was able to launch a newsletter with me and one other person and like some help from the rest of the BuzzFeed team and other departments. Not so much with an app, you need other people, more than just me. So yeah, it was this like really kind of scrappy way to test an editorial voice that we would use kind of across our products. And I don't know what else there is to say about that, but I'd much rather answer questions and try to be more helpful there. So I'll stop talking about what these products are, and I'll share those 2 posts that I wrote, which should hopefully answer some more questions.
I do have one follow-up question, Millie, on that. It's interesting that you say that you wanted to use a newsletter to test a voice for an app, because oftentimes it feels like those audiences are very different. The delivery methods are different. The level of techiness or interest level might be different depending on whether you're an email person or a person who does download apps. Have you found in practice that testing through newsletters for voice applies to other parts of your site? Because BuzzFeed does have a very clear voice to begin with, so I wonder how much nuance you can get out of testing on one platform and applying to another.
So I should mention that when I say testing a voice, it doesn't necessarily mean like copying it from one platform to the other. And Tom Rosensteel, who was my editor at API, loved using this phrase, and it was like platform agnostic. No, it was platform something that wasn't agnostic. The opposite of that. Hold on. I think I wrote it down somewhere because I always forget this. Platform orthodox. So, it's kind of the opposite of what people say when they say platform agnostic. Like, you can just take things and like put it in all these platforms and like let them exist and have it be like another channel for people to come see it, and that's fine. But BuzzFeed's strategy, and this is beyond like just our team, it's a distributed strategy that relies on kind of knowing each platform and its audiences and how to create specific like editorial products for that audience. And I tell this to everyone, but kind of the coolest team at BuzzFeed is not our team, it's BFF, which basically they make content for everywhere else on the internet except BuzzFeed.com. So when I think about kind of BuzzFeed News, the newsletter, I think about I think about our audience, one, and like trying to even define that question. because it was very different from API's like very specific audience. And I think about what they're looking for, what the experience is like you said, Victoria, like when you're reading an email in the morning and like forming that habit versus kind of checking in on an app every now and then. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, definitely. So let me introduce myself for a minute as the self-declared novice here. And before everyone got on this call, I was telling these two ladies that we at Slate, so I'm the director of strategy at Slate, and as part of my duties, I'm relaunching a whole bunch of newsletters. Slate at one point had a fairly robust newsletter network. It was put to the side because there were so many other things to grow at the company, and now there seems to be a resurgence of newsletters. And we want to be a part of that action along with every other media brand. So that was the impetus for sending out my many questions via email. And I'm really glad to have them answered here. But one question that Lauren posted in the comments, which I think is maybe a good place to start, and I can start answering that question and then you guys can weigh in, is what are some of the first things I should do when I'm thinking about starting a newsletter? And I can start with the very, very basic ones because I had no idea. I had never run a newsletter that wasn't to a very specific group. I've run nonprofit newsletters before, which are mostly about keeping funders updated, and so not necessarily a more general interest one like these. And so I'll say that some of the most surprising things that I learned while starting this, many times when you're talking with a development team at your office, they'll think of the easiest way to get the newsletter started via RSS feed or creating something that you can just generate content onto from another source. And what I found from talking to people through TLM and otherwise was that obviously the newsletters that are doing the best are sort of a bespoke product with its own voice, which should feel obvious, but if you talk to developers who are making newsletters and actually like setting up sail through and what have you for you, that seems to be a relatively new idea, or at least a changing idea. The other thing that we had to do is to think about what to do with our lists of people. Being an enthusiastic audience updater in every way, I assumed we could just shoot out an email and start things back up again with the thousands of people that we had on our list before, but you definitely need to think about how to re-engage people, scrub your lists so that your open rates are bigger because you don't have a bunch of dead emails on your list. Continually scrub them. It's also a cost issue depending on how you're sending your emails out, because sometimes you have to pay for every email that you're sending to. So not only does it reduce your open rates if you're sending a bunch of emails out to dead email addresses, but it also makes it look like people aren't opening your emails. And thinking about how you're inviting people who have shown an interest maybe in another newsletter or another set of signups with your product into wanting that newsletter and expecting it. And the downside of that, if you don't do that, is people will think it's spam. Mark your product, your email product as spam, and then you never get to anyone because all the email companies who are hosting people's email addresses will never let them see your product. So those are the quick things that I didn't even think about until I started this project. But do you guys want to weigh in a little bit, like surprising things that you hadn't thought about until you actually got into the nitty-gritty of starting or restarting an email to a whole bunch of people?
I guess the first thing that's been consistent for me, and I'll say this like a broken record, but focus on your audience. Know who that audience is. And I see a question in here about good strategies for growing your audience, especially when you have a narrow subject. And I think that's hard. I guess I can kind of pull from my experience at API there, and that's kind of being where your audience is, and it's probably the benefit of having a narrow subject actually is that you probably know where the audience is hanging out and looking at. So just reach them there. It's been that's probably been a harder thing for me to do at BuzzFeed than it was at API, obviously. So my trick at BuzzFeed is to, trick people into writing nice notes to us and telling us about themselves. And, I bring this up a lot to Claire, who's sitting right next to me and is working with me on this. But this 14-year-old girl from the Philippines wrote in and, loves our newsletter. That's how she gets her news. And, that's how she shares news with her friends. And she had this question in there. I was like, I love your stuff, but, I don't really understand, this Hillary Clinton person. And, it made me laugh because we take a lot of things for granted, especially when working on a kind of general news product. And that just reminds me to kind of always contextualize and always think about your audience and have someone in mind when you're writing for that person.
Yeah, I completely agree with all of that. But one thing that surprised me, when you're collecting people's email addresses, obviously there's a lot of legal ramifications to that if you're a large company. So when you set up a newsletter sign up, you'll have a confirmation page and you have something that says that you actually meant to subscribe to this thing. So we had to get that checked at every newsletter that I've worked at. You have to get that checked by whomever is going to ultimately be responsible. And the other thing I would say if you're starting a newsletter is just subscribe to as many as you possibly can, because I think that word fatigue is actually very important here. I don't think a lot of people understand, especially in the media industry, about just how much creativity there is out there. And I'm disappointed that Laura couldn't join us, but there's a lot of creative engagement, there's a lot of creative writing, there are a lot of newsletters that serve really different purposes than just giving you the news. And sometimes even those boring legal emails or those this is how you subscribe, they're another opportunity for voice, they're another opportunity to give people a sense of what it is that you're doing and what it is that they can expect by being on this listserv of getting an email however many times you send it out. And setting that expectation every single time you get an email makes people think that it's valuable and something that they're actually going to want to be part of their inbox clutter in the morning. So yeah, just don't take any of those little things for granted.
I think another small thing is to add subscribe links to the bottom of your email just in case people share. That's pro tip number 1, so easy, low-hanging fruit. The other thing I will share is that our newsletter team, Dan and Ray, who kind of focuses on all the other fun BuzzFeed newsletters, recently launched a dude a day and occasional bunnies, separate newsletters, not the same one. They will send re-engagement campaigns and do that every now and then to kind of as a way to scrub their list, because it doesn't matter if you have 1 million subscribers if they're bringing down the numbers you really care about, which are opens, clicks, whatever. So those re-engagement campaigns are literally hi, we haven't seen you in a while, you haven't opened in X amount of days. You're going to be deleted unless you tell us otherwise. And if you don't, then if you don't want this anymore, sorry. So that's one. The other kind of re-engagement email is hi, we're getting rid of this newsletter. We just did that with our politics and entertainment one. And what Ray and Dan did was have links to subscribe to our newsletter if they wanted to. So that simultaneously, helps you get rid of old emails and can gain subscribers for new newsletters, for other newsletters.
How well did that work?
Those work really well on both fronts. So we see a lot of new subscribers, and we get rid of the robot, quiet ghost ones.
So I wanted to jump to a slightly different topic because I've seen a whole bunch of questions, both pre-chat and in the chat about this. Can you guys talk a little bit about monetizing newsletters? Do you do it? I think, Ariana, you said you do it. How much does that weigh into your editorial strategy? How do you think about it? What fights have you had about it? Overall, what are your thoughts in that area and things that we can learn from that?
Yeah, so actually we don't do it. We thought about doing it. We had people approach us about doing it. We are planning at some point probably to do it, but for where we are right now, we've decided it's not worth it because monetizing comes with a set of expectations. It comes with, like, you're adding ads basically to your newsletter. And at that particular moment in time, that wasn't what we wanted to do. And it was going to interfere with the other ways that we were monetizing the podcast and the product. But it's something that we're looking to do in the future. And there's talk of, like, we're trying to think of how to take this campaign and make it something people can do at any moment in time. And it's something we're talking about doing with other member stations across the country, like localizing the product. And I think the newsletter will be the place where they're going to sell ads. So I wish I could say more, but that's...
Millie, on yours, have you tried that at all?
No, so I should say we launched in February, so definitely haven't. Rachel, I see your question about what to charge sponsors and advertisers. I do think that some BuzzFeed newsletters have ads, at least like native ads, and I need to double check on those numbers and whether we share them. But but as of right now, unfortunately we don't have any ads or any monetization demands.
One thing that I'll say, in the previous incarnation of our newsletters, Slate always added ads into them, and probably followed the, like, more traditional path of, if there's a place to monetize, let's use it. And one of the discussions that we've been having back and forth quite a bit is doing pretty extensive testing around the UX of those ads, not assuming that you can't use ads or you should always use ads, but instead thinking about, like, the least obtrusive way to include an ad, and then testing different versions of it. So there are many questions in here about A/B testing subject lines, but I also think that if you are considering advertising, A/B testing how the ads appear, like whether you want to do little call outs at the top, if you actually want to do inline, visuals, which I think look a little old school at this point, and there are a lot of other more creative ways that people are trying things out, like little call outs that look almost like pieces of content within the ads. Those are things that I think can greatly increase the impact of the revenue of, like, the actual buy that they're putting in there, but also can make the user experience a lot better. Karen is asking, is there pressure to monetize, and how do you balance that? I think that depends on the place, obviously, but I would say for us, there's, like, if there's an opportunity, the case always needs to be why we shouldn't do it rather than why we should monetize. I don't know if you guys have felt anything different on that front.
We don't have to right now. I like to think it's because we're this kind of, long game marketing, like, branding tool than any, like, an immediate sell through. So.
Okay. And Ariana, I will keep trying to figure out how to get you on chat.
Oh, no, I got it.
Oh, you got it. Okay,
yeah,
cool.
I went incognito, it worked.
Yeah,
Okay. So any other thoughts about monetization or sponsors, or additional questions from the crowd on that? While you're thinking about that, maybe we can talk a little bit about testing in general, best practices that you guys have seen, and or, like, trends that you figured out across multiple products or over time on your own product that work really well that you've seen through testing.
I can start with that. We had one important piece of testing that we did. We knew that we wanted people to also be listening to the podcast. Like, it was okay if they didn't, but that was our big main thing that we hoped people were going to take away from this. So we did a bunch of testing on the best ways to do that, and the answer ended up being really simple and just fairly obvious, just visual. So we made a great big button at the top that said listen, and people started clicking on it. And it took a bunch of times of, like, deciding what color to make that button, and is it better as a link, and how many times should you incorporate the same link over and over again before people actually click. But that was huge, and it hasn't stayed the same since after the project. Like, people don't use that button in the same way. We hope it's because if they're core enough audience to, like, really care about the information we're sending in the podcast that maybe they've subscribed another way. And so that's something that we had to try a bunch of times, and like now we're reconsidering. So I think it's just testing is an ongoing process throughout the station, throughout people who are sending newsletters about podcasts. Like, how do you link this to the other thing, the other call to action that you want people to actually follow up on? And the other thing is subject lines. We A/B test those like pretty much every week, and I just leave a couple of hours between when you send the first newsletter and when people end at the end of the day. We've had really different results than other podcasts at the station. So we're in the same building as Radiolab and Death, Sex, and Money, and for them, they've found really different things work for their audience. So for us, we don't just say our show this week is, like, we try to do something a little bit more creative. Whereas a show like Death, Sex, and Money, they found that people subscribe to their newsletter because they want to know what the show is that week, and they want an update on whatever content is coming out. So we have found that we're also like A/B testing ourselves against everyone else around us and other people in the company as well. And there are things that will work for other audiences that just really won't work for ours. I don't know if that answers your question.
Millie, do you have anything that you want to add to that?
Yes, that one is really hard to do an A/B test for a newsletter that goes out at the same time every day, because the way we use Campaign Monitor and the way A/B tests work is that you send, the 2 subject lines to 50% of your audience, and then whatever gets the higher open rate, you can either set a time to send or you can manually send. And the only thing that does for us is, one, show you a really close race between headlines, and it's almost useless at that point, and what you're taking away is giving the newsletter to your readers at a different time. It's super successful when you have something like, and unfortunately this isn't a newsletter I work on, so I can't speak more to it, but when you have something like a dog a day or an occasional bunny, you can build in more delight using different subject lines and time to send your newsletters. It's much harder when you have to kind of build a habit and send something every day at the same time.
One question that I have, and several other people had this too, is and this obviously depends on your individual newsletters, but have you found particularly big success recruiting subscribers from one particular kind of source or sign-up method? And another user asked, where do you find, what's your breakdown of users, where do they come from as subscribers? But I'm curious about the actual technical implementation of pulling people on. Is recruiting people from a sign-up page on your site better than running a Facebook ad, better than having a post sign-up page on another newsletter as an ad? What are your thoughts about that, and do you actually do that at all, or is it all organic just from your site?
So a lot of BuzzFeed's newsletters have been really successful at signing up people by having just these very clear, straightforward posts about what what you'll be getting. Hold on, I can share a link, which is from Ray, who helps us make all of these. And I think these are just really great way to give people a clear idea of what the product is. And I know he's tested a bunch of these, and the most effective thing is to just be as straightforward as you can, especially when you're trying to have people sign up for something for them to receive in their inbox. Kind of the other thing I wanted to talk about was kind of related to what you asked and ROI. But one other thing, it's really hard to figure out where your subscribers are coming from. We have some preliminary data about what pages they're subscribing from based on where we put the signups, and that's one indicator, but that can be compounded with where that page was shared, where was it displayed, was it on the home page, was it not? So it's really hard. I wish it were easier because it would make all our lives easier, but it's really hard. And besides like on-site marketing, we haven't done really any like in earnest marketing. Anyway, so I wanted to talk about ROI and someone's question. Who was that? Karen's question about ROI. And the newsletter itself doesn't have, some like you need to have X open rate, but the newsletter is a really great place to have really good leads for people to install the app. And kind of going along with what Ariana said about, placing the listen link, because there's always some call to action, right? And sometimes, and I've been testing this a lot in our newsletter, is putting a link to sign up or to download our app and or sign up for our Android beta. And based on just like maybe 2 weeks of doing various things, and rather 2 months of doing our download the app link, I've realized that people will click the most when it's useful to what, like, the context they're already in. So I don't mean to call it the New York Times. I love them, but their New York Times Now email just has like, that gray box up top that says like, download our app for more. And like your eyes begin to glaze over them when you realize that you don't, like, it's not useful information for you. In the same way that we build habits by opening emails at the same time every day, like that's a habit you build because you want to save like 2 seconds. So I found that instead of just kind of dumping our download link anywhere or somewhere on the newsletter in the same spot, I've been putting it into like places that it would actually help. I think the most successful one was during the SCOTUS decision weeks, and we wrote like, hey, this product comes out like once a day. If you want alerts like when this decision happens, like download the app and we'll let you know. And it's always about being useful for your readers. So be useful, I guess.
I feel like that's advice for life as well as for newsletters. Ariana, do you have any thoughts about that, about where your subscribers come from or additional like ROI justifications?
Yeah, I mean, I would echo all of that. And there's a question here about MailChimp embeds, and those are our friends. Like, those are pretty much everywhere on our site. But we've also, during Bored and Brilliant and during a couple of other projects that we've done, our newsletter is a mechanism of getting to something else. So we've also asked partners to put the embed link on their site. And we know that especially during the initial days of Bored and Brilliant, we I wrote up some copy for NPR to put on their site. And when you were on the NPR site, you could type in your email address and start getting the Note to Self newsletter. So using those, like if you can find someone who will put that on their page, that's useful. We've definitely had trouble with embeds like showing up on mobile, which is an issue because that's where most people are signing up. But it's a thing that that's a battle that has been very much worth fighting for us. And it's hard. I mean, it's hard to say where all of our subscribers come from. We've done like internal marketing campaigns on Facebook. We've done call outs just on air, on the podcast, on live on NPR. But we're also, we're trying to get people to do something pretty fundamentally different than read news every day. So the call outs some of them have to be kind of creative. Like, if you sign up for this, this is the actual thing that you're going to get in exchange tomorrow. So a lot of times it's more of a promise. Like, if you want to know the answer to this question, sign up for our newsletter and we'll tell you next week. Here's the easiest way that you can possibly do it. Type your name into this box right now. Embed code.
I think kind of going off of that is to just, I feel like a lot of what we're doing with newsletters and like emailing people things is setting expectations, and as much as you can be as clear on like what you're sending or what they're receiving, the better. So
I actually have one follow-up question about that. I think that one problem with testing and seeing what works is that then you get stuck in the thing that works because you're superstitious about changing it. And so as far as like the content that you include and the UX decisions that you make, how often do you change things up or think about changing things up to like avoid the glassy-eyed reader UX of just skipping over the things that they know are already going to be there? And how much does that improve or sustain your readership versus create a risk for losing people if they are not expecting a certain format or style in your newsletter?
I can answer that because we launched in February and we've kind of been redesigning very small things ever since. And if you can't tell, but you feel like the newsletter is either getting like shorter or faster to read, then that's like a good thing. And someone asked about kind of balancing and incorporating visuals or remaining more text heavy. Our newsletter is very text heavy. And it's very long, and it's become even longer. And, you know, I heard a lot from people, from just our readers and like my friends, who said that it was really hard to skim because sometimes they don't need all of that information. And I have screenshots in one of those links I sent. I'll re-up it. But yeah, it was hard to skim. It was, you needed more than 5 minutes. And there wasn't enough cues as to what you should read if you know you're already interested in something. So we made, you know, very few changes, but it just meant like bigger headlines, better visual cues about where to look, and more visuals to balance out the text. And I think there's like, you'll notice that I hate giving directions and always like prefer guidelines, but because it's going to be different for everyone. And, you know, it's going to depend on your newsletter. And like, I keep saying a do today, but it's literally an image and like 2 sentences, and that is perfect for them. If it were more pictures or more words, it would be like multiple dudes a day, and it would just be too much. So I think it depends, which is what I say often, but it depends.
And Ariana, have you seen any particular success in either format of, you know, pictures or text heavy or shorter or longer?
Yeah, I think if the change that you're making you believe will make something easier for people, like you need to check in and make sure that that actually happened. Like, is this listen button still useful to our audience? Like, well, if people stop clicking on it, then maybe not, but like, you can't completely draw assumptions. So we actually do a lot of asking. Like, we'll ask people in our audience, people who we know subscribe to the newsletter, and back and forth, and just sometimes you just have to rely on anecdotal feedback when you're testing. But that sense of getting stuck and not trying things because you know it's working, I think, is a very real question, and it's also scares me because then things start to look the same, which is, again, where something like Laura Olin's newsletter, which is called Everything Changes, is so wonderful because you get to see something creative every week. And I would have heard her say before that not everything actually does work, but when you're at a more standard media company, it's like it is harder to deviate quite that much. As far as visuals go, we find visuals useful. I think if we sent out a newsletter that looked fundamentally different, then that was something we were very conscious of in transitioning from Bored and Brilliant. We wanted to keep using the same art and art from the same artist, because otherwise people were going, even though it was transitioning into something slightly different, they were going to think that they weren't going to recognize what was actually in their inbox. So there are certain cues that visuals can handle for you, like you were talking about the big gray box at the top, that you probably, if you're going to change, you need to be careful. We also changed our name since the newsletter launched, and our name was particularly difficult because you're getting an email once a day from something called Note to Self, and we had probably 50 people write in and be like, oh my god, did I send myself an email? So sometimes it's just I think visuals are extremely important in maintaining consistency, and that's something that I try to stay very conscious of. And I think people have a little bit more patience for scrolling through a longer newsletter than they might on the web, but I try not to have more than 1,000 words of text.
Yeah, there was another question in here from Mara. She was asking if specifically to Millie, but to both of you, do you ever feel like you're afraid of tweaking too much so that the product looks different from what people originally expected? And it sounds like you're talking about that a little bit, Ariana, but any more thoughts on that?
So yeah, I don't think you should make drastic changes that kind of change what you're offering to them. I think there's kind of this like boundary of change that you can make where it's still the product that they signed up for, so they don't feel like they've been tricked. And I think that was, Vox did this thing where their newsletters usually bullet points, and they made they turned those bullet points into paragraphs, and everyone hated it. And that's because people were sold on the value proposition of reading bullet points, not sent paragraphs. And I think you have to kind of identify what that boundary is for you. I think if we started doing just 3 news events a day and kind of left everything else out, I think that would kind of be a disservice to people who signed up. And I guess the one thing to say about that is to define your boundary, you need to define your selling point. What is it? What's the product you sold, and what can you change around that?
Jen asked if there are other examples of newsletters that you guys use as inspiration, that we can use as inspiration.
Yeah, I was just typing a response. I love some of the smaller ones. There's someone named Melody Kramer. I think she's on the TLM listserv, but she does a lot of just call and response from her audience. Here's a question, here's a thing that I'm thinking about, let's try something together, which we use as inspiration here. I think Laura's newsletters, and of course fantastic for that kind of creative experimentation. And some of just the end of the day curation stuff where it's you really trust this voice, this is what you want to, this is the kind of thing that you would be reading if you had the time today, here's someone else to do it for you. I think Caitlin Dewey at the Washington Post has a really great one for people who are interested in tech and culture. So a lot of times I like to read what she's reading in order to know what we need to be including. Anne Friedman, I think, it's kind of a classic, but people who aren't afraid of really using a voice and trying sending out something that doesn't necessarily sound particularly polished once a week.
I really love I'll share news ones right now, but I love Bit of News, which they are really into experimentation too. They every now and then I'm like, hey, you changed something, and try to figure out what it is. But it's just bit of news. I really like the browser, but I just like the browser as a brand, and they just happen to deliver me whatever it is they sell via email. I really like what Mic Check is doing. I think the team there is, they're obviously trying new things and having fun within, trying to find their voice. So it's been fun to watch kind of a nascent kind of relaunch. I think in terms of just clear editorial products, the week's 10 things you need to know is just so straightforward, and it's very straight. If you're looking for just every day 10 things, there it is. It's great. What else? I read a lot of newsletters. I'm looking through my inbox right now. I'll give a shout out to colleagues, because my colleague Sammy Main has this daily newsletter that's called Pep Talk, and it just gives you a nice quote or inspirational thing with a gift. And today is your victory is right around the corner, never give up, Nicki Minaj. It's really nice. Yeah. And I think there's such a wide range to what we can do, and I think as an organization, BuzzFeed kind of launching 2 joke newsletters that were literally started as jokes is really cool. Also, Sammy's is not it's her personal email. But yeah, that one's good. And I love my editor's newsletter, Stacy's newsletter. Hers is weekly, and I don't know what I feel like I read so much that I actually don't have time for as many newsletters as I like to read.
Mm-hmm.
I want to hear other people's though. Sorry.
Yeah. Oh, I would just add to that. I remembered I love the Atavist. I think they have an excellent newsletter. And even just there are some things that I don't necessarily think of as like media newsletters that are also great. Like I love, no, I think actually Birchbox does kind of a fantastic email once a week where it's like there's something useful in it that isn't just selling me a product, and I am still inclined to click on it. But yeah, I would love to hear other people's as well.
Yeah, I was going to encourage people who are in the chat, if you guys want to put links to the ones that you really like as well. I'll send out a transcript of this chat afterward, which is a great feature and bonus of not being able to use Q&A. But we can have those to look at for inspiration later. I also have to say that API's newsletter saved my life while I was starting this role, because this was really my first odd dev first role. And I constantly have our publisher and other people in the office coming up to me being like, what's the future of the internet, as like casual coffee conversation. And I feel like if I just read that newsletter the first thing in the morning before anyone else does, then I'm good to go. But unfortunately, I've shared my secret across this newsroom, so now everyone sends the same links around being like, did you see this? So I can't appear as smart as I did in my first days at Slate, but it has been a real lifesaver. I encourage everyone to subscribe to that too.
That's really nice, Victoria.
No, seriously.
Really nice.
So many hours of my life. So I want to diverge just a little bit as everyone keeps posting their favorite newsletters and ask you guys what tools you love. I feel like this is something that everyone is always sort of asking each other, what are you using now? What's great? What's easy? There's been a lot of back and forth of MailChimp and SailThrough and other like plugins and such that go along with what you're already using. But let's talk about tips, tricks, hacks, and tools for a minute and what you've been loving.
I really like MailChimp. It's incredibly easy to use. Before this, I was working with Eloqua, which I found not particularly friendly. Constant Contact I've used that in the past, and it was easy. But MailChimp has been great because it's just it's very easy to use whatever analytics are available and to make changes really fast, and to have different templates that you can pull from to be able to see other people's data, especially if they're in the same company. Like for us here at WNYC, we do a lot of comparison, and it's just really easy to find what you're looking for. That's my MailChimp advertisement.
Yeah, MailChimp. No, we use Campaign Monitor. We use MailChimp at API, and I loved it. I think there are some things about MailChimp that Campaign Monitor doesn't have that I really wish it would, which is it's more like you can see how groups of people are acting within any period of time. So you don't really, it doesn't have that like CRM aspect as much as Campaign Monitor doesn't. So you can kind of look at someone's, behavior across newsletters and across campaigns, and I think that's really useful, because it puts the emphasis on the person and not the email campaign.
I would also encourage anyone on the chat too to type in anything that they've used and loved. In addition, if you have ways that you've recruited people into your subscriptions through different tools, I think that's also really useful. MailChimp. Not brought to you by MailChimp, but fun to say. So let's talk a little bit about, we've touched upon a lot of things, so I think in honor of all of the time that you guys have spent so far, we'll start wrapping up. But if people want to post any additional questions in here, now is the chance. And let me ask you as well, a couple of people asked what your recommendations would be to build a strong subscription base for a very niche newsletter. I think, I don't know if this is accurate, but I get the impression from how you've talked so far that you have fairly wide audiences, that you're zeroing in onto one thing that they like and building from that. But if, for example, you're working with a small nonprofit that is trying to work on a very specific thing, and you have sort of a narrow range of topics that you can work on, like what is that a boon because it's so focused, or do you have advice that you would pass on trying to get the most out of that very niche subject?
I mean, I think it depends what your goals are, right? Like, if your goal is to have as many subscribers as possible, and that's the thing that you need to present as your return on investment, then probably you want to find a way to make the niche topic seem more applicable to your life. If it's that you want to have a really high open rate and you want to have a specific piece of engagement, then I think narrowing in on a niche market and figuring out the particular Reddit thread where those people like congregate and making sure that the sign up is in there somehow, like that's, it depends on the audience. I mean, I think we have a fairly niche topic, and the other podcasts here at WNYC also tend to be fairly niche, and the institutional goal has been like as large of a subscriber base as you can, but really what's more important is engagement. So that's my ultimate answer to that question. I mean, we also, in getting people to subscribe to the newsletter, we've used other newsletter lists, as Millie was saying. There was an earlier project where people were tracking their sleep, and we sent out another newsletter blast to those people who had signed up for that list saying, here's another thing that you can do. And it was like plenty of people clicked through and signed up. And so working with other newsletters, working with other people who are already covering that niche topic, it works in lots of other realms of social media, and I think in newsletters it has tended to be the same, at least in our experience here.
Let me turn that question on you, Victoria. How did you, I mean, find API's newsletter? Because that's a niche, industry newsletter, and you found it useful and then forwarded to all your friends. So, like, how did that even start?
I honestly have no idea, but I know that
It's hard. It's hard to figure out where subscribers come from.
Yeah, well, what it feels like, newsletters and podcasts to me feel like, I'm not a runner, but I briefly tried to be a runner. And when you first start like doing a form of exercise, you talk about it all the time because you're like obsessed with your own like life change, right? And suddenly when I tried to run for a very short period of time, I no longer run. I was like, oh my God, there's this whole world of people who run before and after work, and we all have something to talk about, right? And suddenly you're like getting information about running, and the people who are runners also know that you're a runner. And I feel like industry newsletters and podcasts in general have that same kind of feeling where like you can listen to a podcast every week and you won't know anyone else who listens to it, but once you know someone else who listens to podcasts, you can talk about them all day long. And the same goes for specifically newsletters in general, but specifically like topic and industry specific newsletters like API. Once you know what people are interested in, it comes up in conversation once, and then it comes up in conversation always. So I think like the reason why it's so why you have like great subscription rates both on podcasts and really strong newsletters is because people return again and again for that sort of like insider validation and like intimacy. But I don't know how people find out that other people are runners except by like randomly talking about it. So I literally think word of mouth is the best way to handle that.
And that's why the skim is going to take over the world.
Yeah. So I don't know how you create word of mouth in the digital space except by being very loud. So.
I'm going to check something because we have a kind of all sign-up page with all of our newsletters, and I'm pretty sure that none of our new newsletters are on there. And by that, I mean Dude a Day and Bunnies. Dogs is on there. Dogs has outshined the newsletter, but I'm not bitter.
That
yeah,
should be our ultimate takeaway. If you want a successful newsletter, include dogs.
so, we have the sign up page with all of our newsletters, but, the two kind of joke newsletters I keep mentioning, the Do Today, which I will have to send links to because I keep mentioning them, and Occasional Bunnies are nowhere on that page, but they've gotten so many subscribers in a very short amount of time. I'm just going to share numbers, but don't share them beyond this group. And I think Do Today has like 50,000 subscribers within like the month of August, which is insane. And it's because, hold on, here's the newsletter. And it's because like kind of the lesson that we all get from this is that it was a very specific product for a very specific audience, and like if you're into dudes, then you will share that dude and like tell people about this thing that you found. So yeah, I think it's a lot of word of mouth, unfortunately, just because there's like podcasts, and hopefully these problems will be fixed sooner than later, but there's no like central mechanism for discovery, which is kind of a larger problem that I don't think is within scope of this conversation.
So I think we should start wrapping up. We've touched on most things, but I just wanted to ask you both one last tip or trick that you would pass on, sort of based on hearing some of the things that some of the feedback from the people who've been talking to us of what you should keep in mind. Obviously, audience has been the big thing that we're walking away from this, and keeping your focus narrow. Also, dogs and dudes. And I'll start from something that I've noticed, but I think that the biggest trick that I have heard from multiple people from talking to them one-on-one is to think about length and scannability, which seems obvious, but and also like loadability. There have been some really amazing visually minded sites that have tried visual newsletters, and the format of it hasn't really succeeded. So thinking about the actual usability, particularly on your phone, of newsletters, and that you're not scrolling a million times unless you're creating a bespoke, editorial product that lives just in email as a beautiful editorial voice. Like, I think that would be the exception. But I thought a lot more about format and length after talking to other people who had seen successes and failures. So I would pass that on to other newbie newsletter makers. What would you guys pass on?
You already. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, I have a really simple one, which a lot of the best newsletters that I've signed up for have come from someone forwarding them to me, and there was a little line at the bottom where you literally ask people to forward the newsletter on. And I've found that useful, and also especially if you're using something like MailChimp, or I think TinyLetter does this as well, to make a version of the newsletter that's shareable so that it doesn't just have to live in email. And then ask the question after you write the newsletter, like, what's the thing that someone would want to send on in this? Think of it as a shareable product, even though it's just email.
Yeah, that's really smart.
I would say, just because you stole audience, or else I'd hammer that down some more, but just be useful. And useful doesn't have to mean like help me be better at my job. It could mean like help me have less anxiety about the internet, which is like why Bored and Brilliant was so, excelled, because it was so useful for this like problem. So yeah, be useful, solve a problem, and if not, then like be really fucking delightful.
Yeah, I think delight is something that people put last on the list of reasons to do a newsletter, but is probably first on the list of reasons to open a newsletter. One thing that I always encouraged curators at Upworthy to do when I worked there is, before they finalized anything, any editorial product, to send it to a friend or to talk it through with a friend who had nothing to do with the media industry, and have that friend in mind when you're thinking about innovating and making a new product, or even like finalizing framing on a piece of content. And delight is always the thing that people get excited about when you share those with them. There's even when you're sharing really important substantive work, if you can figure out a way to like continually surprise people over and over, that seems like the clear path to subscribers in a variety of ways. Last question that was on here is, are newsletters ever not a good idea? I don't know if that's a great way to end, but it's a good question. So let's talk about that for just a second.
I asked, that was Sarah, right? And we kind of went back and forth on this. And I said it depends. Newsletters are a slow process for all the reasons we mentioned above, not including like, it's hard to tell where people come up. It's not like the most shareable because the only way you can really do that is by forwarding it or literally telling a friend. So if it's like short-term audience growth that you're talking about, like you just want 1 million people to whatever sign up for something, it's like go for it, but that's not, I don't think that a newsletter would be the best case for that. But I think if you want to build like this community and like this engaged and loyal audience, it's going to take, it's slow, but I think the long-term gains are tremendous.
Ariana, has there ever been a time where you have just said, no way, let's not do that newsletter?
I mean, I would agree with that. I think the long-term benefits are really wonderful, but it does take a lot of time. And there is no wonderful mechanism to sort through emails if you get them in response. Like it's an investment, and if you aren't going to actually put in the investment, then you're not really going to build a newsletter base. Like if it's not a wonderful product that you really enjoy putting together because it comes from some kind of like core of your mission, then I don't think people are going to feel that way about it either. And there are so many ways to get products. Like I love the Nuzzle digest that I get every day that tells me what other people are reading. Like, what is another newsletter going to add to that? And there are many wonderful newsletters out there that could add to the mix of what I might be seeing on social media or getting my news if I go to the homepage of a different website. But if you don't really have a clear answer to that question, like, and your audience can't tell what it is, they might not subscribe.
I think that's actually a good place to end. Let's end there. That feels very transformative and thoughtful. Thank you guys so much for jumping on this slightly awkward interface. And thank you all the like 40+ people who have been chatting along with us on the side. I'm going to download the transcript of the chat. I'm going to slightly edit the beginning of this so you don't see our awkward back and forth and post the full recording, hopefully, if this works all right. And obviously, if there are follow-up questions, we can continue them on the TLM chain. But really, this has been an amazing experience for me as someone who's just like, I don't know how to do newsletters. Someone help me. And then to get great responses like this and a real great dialogue around it has been wonderful. So I hope we do more of these. But thank you, Millie, and thank you, Ariana, so much. And I will buy you lunch soon, since apparently we're all in New York, and I had no idea.
Thanks to Victoria for organizing.
Yeah.
Anytime. Happy to do it again. Thank you all, and thanks everyone who has been watching. I'm going to stop the broadcast. Goodbye. Have a great lunch.